Getting the last little bit here. Dang, European food just hits different. It's great. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on our principles of design in lesson 7. Alrighty, so this is our kind of second to 2 parts here on the elements and principles of design, talking about the principles. So in lessons 3 through 5, I talk about the principle or the elements, sorry, not the principles. The elements as being like ingredients to making our artwork. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be organized in a good way, but all artwork pretty much has the elements of art, just like, you know, all food has ingredients to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's following a recipe. So the principles are the recipes. They're how we organize the artwork and make it successful. So what are the principles of design? The elements of design, which is lessons 3 through 5, are what visual components the artist uses to create the artwork with. The principles of design are how those elements are being used. So, for example, if I'm talking about the differences between the principles and the elements, I would say the what are being used. I can see color is being used, shape is being used, line is being used, and then the principles ask us, how are those elements being used? Are they being used to create balance? Are they being used to create variety? Are they being used to create a sense of rhythm and repetition? So that's what our principles are going to be, is the things I just listed there. And the principles of design can be used in an infinite numbers of ways to arrange the elements of art. So whereas most of the elements are going to be present in all artworks, you might only see a few of the principles being utilized in an artwork, because you really don't need all of them to work, you know, for artwork to be successful. You really just need a couple or so. So our first one here, and when I talk about a few of these, it's not so much that like having one of these in an artwork is a positive thing. It's more that when you have a balance of the two, then you have a good artwork. And I'll kind of explain more on that in a moment. But our first example here that we have is, or our first principle we have here is unity, or the feeling of harmony between all parts of the work, a sense of completeness or cohesiveness. So unity by itself, very few artworks are entirely unified. We have artists like minimal artist John McCracken, who is about as close to being a unified artist as we can see. Using unity in an artwork can be used intentionally for conceptual meaning, but it can also make an artwork boring. So, for example, John McCracken is a conceptual artist. He was an artist during the minimalist movement. And so if you can tell there, the minimalist movement is to have as like much simplicity and just minimal quality to an artwork in general. And so he would just paint these canvases or these boards a solid, just like flat color, and then just prop them against the wall like this. And again, it's pretty much entirely unified. It's a sense of completeness or wholeness by using this color red, you know, over the entire piece with no variety whatsoever or variation. But if you don't have intention with using just unity in your work, it can be rather boring. But John McCracken, you know, he was part of this movement where they were trying to experiment with how minimal artwork could be, and like, you know, essentially what would qualify as being an artwork. How little could we provide and still be considered art? So his artwork there was intention behind it. It wasn't just, you know, he didn't want to paint any more colors. There was an intention behind it. On the other end of the spectrum, so when I am talking about these, let's look in my little box while I'm using my hands for this. So unity is over here, and variety is over here. And the idea is that you meet in the middle somewhere with those two things to have a good sense of balance in the artwork. So variety is combining different elements to create interest. The piece I have for an example here is by Sarah Sees. She's an installation artist, and she is a rather unconventional artist, I will say, but her work is totally varied. She doesn't really have a lot of like unity at all to her work. Everything is randomized, everything is different. And so the piece I've got here, well, first off, variety is used to provide diversity. It acts to counter the unity, but too much variety can be very chaotic. So Sarah Sees is really strategic actually about how she uses her varied compositions like that we see here. So she just has these random little organizing piles and lines and like different things being used to show a lot of different mediums in her work, or a lot of different found objects. She's strategic because she knows she is an installation artist, and she knows that most of her work is going to go up in a white walled gallery that doesn't have a lot of distractions in it. And that white walled gallery provides a sense of unity in the work. So while all of the stuff that she's bringing like for her artwork into the gallery is very chaotic, that has a lot of variety to it, she knows that the gallery is already going to have something there for her to have unity in her work, to balance the variety with the unity. So when she installs these pieces, we have, these chaotic, like, very diverse moments, but then our eyes can rest on the white background of the gallery wall that she's bringing it into. Now, if Sarah Sees, for example, was a public artist, so she was making artwork that was going to be outside, and the background was not going to be this like white walled flat surface, it would be, the trees and the sidewalk and the people walking by and all of that. That would probably not be a great choice for her work because there would be way too much variety, nowhere for your eye to rest, no unity to counter the sense of variety there. But yeah, variety is essentially just the opposite of unity. And unless there is some conceptual meaning or like meaning for the content, balancing variety and unity is the way to use these principles in an organized way. Okay, so balancing variety and unity. I'm going to show you this piece by artist Jacob Lawrence, who his birthday was actually, well, depending on when you're watching this, his birthday was actually yesterday. So happy birthday, late birthday to Jacob Lawrence. He does a really wonderful job of balancing his unity and variety in his artwork. And he establishes these visual themes throughout the piece that help him to come back to certain elements instead of it just being all random. And he repeats and varies those themes throughout the piece. So some elements that I see being used here to create this sense of balance with variety and unity are color. He's got the same like blue color coming back in, slightly different tones and shades and tints, but same like hue of blue that we see throughout the whole piece. We've got this flat yellow background that's sort of like contrast as well. Shape is another element that he uses to repeat itself with like the figured and the form. Also just these like little shapes he's got up here, the rectangles that are part of the buildings here. But he does a really great job of, having a lot of chaos, essentially, a lot of variety happening in the movement and in like the composition of his piece, but he ties it all together with color and shape very, very well. All right, our next two are emphasis and subordination. And these are two separate principles, but I'm going to talk about them in a similar way to how I talked about variety and unity, where emphasis is on one side and subordination is on one side. And to have a successful artwork, you need to meet somewhere in the middle. Now, in the background here, well, first of all, emphasis is used to draw attention to an area, and subordination creates neutral areas of lesser interest. So the painting I've got here in the back, this is a painting by Monet. It's called Sunrise. And he uses subordination and emphasis in a really, really clever way that helps us to make this piece feel like it's very well organized. The thing he uses to create emphasis and subordination is his color scheme. That's the elements that he uses to identify emphasis and subordination. He uses these blue, like muted tones back here to push back the space to create areas of lesser interest or neutral areas, where he then, the emphasis is used to draw attention to an area. And so his complementary color, orange of blue, those are opposites on the color wheel, is our point of interest here. It's our like emphasized point, with it being this like bright, pure hue and not like a lesser, like more neutralized, muted color of blue like we see back here. So for example, like if the harbor in this piece were all painted like yellow, which is an analogous color to orange, the emphasis on the sun would not be as strong. But because he's using complementary colors and he understands color theory, this painting is really successfully done, and it has a really emphasized quality to it. All righty, going back into emphasis and subordination, just the differences in how to create them as well. There's lots of ways to create emphasis, and essentially the ways that I'm talking about creating emphasis, just doing the opposite. Sorry, I've got a hair in my eye. The opposite of these things is how you would create subordination. So the position, that's one way to create your emphasis. The farther down something is, just like with our space relationships, the farther down something is, like the more in focus it's going to seem. It can also be like the center, like if something's like dead in the center of a canvas or of a painting or a drawing, then that's going to seem like that's the point of emphasis as well. Another way to create it is contrast, using a juxtaposition of strongly dissimilar elements. So we're using that in that previous piece with the contrasting elements of blue and orange in the color wheel. So those two were contrasting colors, and that's, create a way of creating emphasis as well. Color intensity. So in this flower piece right here, we've got bright, pure hues of like yellow and orange seen in the flower, which is obviously our point of interest here. And then in the background, we see that there is like less intense versions of like blues and greens that we see. Also contrasting colors as well. Those are very opposite one another on the color wheel. This is more on the warm side, and this is more on the cool side. And then lastly, size. The larger something is, the more emphasis it's going to have. So this flower being much larger than the rest of the flowers in the background indicate that this is the point of interest here. Other elements are subdued or pushed back to emphasize the focal point and to keep the viewer from being distracted. So subordination, on the other hand, is when other elements are subdued or pushed back to emphasize the focal point and to keep the viewer from being too distracted. So imagine for a second if this whole piece was just these bright yellow, orange flowers everywhere. There would be no point of emphasis there. There would be no variation. There would be no like resting point for the eye. It would just all be like, it'd all be emphasis. The whole thing would be an emphasize. But we look at and we signify there is a sense of importance about this flower because of the information that is subdued around it. All right, our next two are proportion and scale. Very similar principles, but they have very different meaning. This is the size of elements, both individually and in relation to other elements. Okay, so scale, this is the size relationship of one thing to another thing. So this over here, this is an example of scale relationships. In the diagrams, the middle is the same size, like the two middle circles, those are exactly the same size circle. But our perception of that is skewed because of the size of the circles that are around the two middle circles. Because in scale to these littler circles here, this circle seems much larger. And in relation to these bigger circles here, the middle circle seems much smaller. So, but they're exactly the same size. And that's a relationship of scale, not of proportion. The proportion would be the size relationship of parts to a whole. So when you think about proportions, think about like body proportions. So if your arm, for example, which is a part of like your body, it was 4 times as long as it is currently, that would be out of proportion to the body because it's all relative to the same thing. And another way you can think about it is if there is a white background behind something. So like take my coffee cup for, well, it'll focus on it. Take my coffee cup, for example. If there's a white background behind my coffee cup, then, and it still looks exactly like this, right? Then we're not going to really know how big or small it is. There's nothing to compare it to. There's no scale relationship. But when it's compared to me, or if it's compared to, something in the background, we have a comparison to make a scale relationship with. Whereas proportion, if the coffee cup again was like, really, really wide, like way too wide, like as wide as a soup bowl, for example, we would know proportionally something's not going right there. Like that's not what a coffee cup is supposed to look like. And we can compare it to only itself. If there's a white background or if there's not a white background, we would know that proportionally something is not right. So when you're thinking about those two things, proportion is something like a hand and a foot. So if those two things are being compared to one another, that's a proportional relationship. Whereas with scale, if a body and a tree are being compared, that's a scale relationship. So make sure that you have like the key differences between those two things. They're very different, but they both are relating to size. This is on the golden ratio. I'm going to attach a video in our our Ed Puzzle folder on golden ratio. If you would please watch that one when you can. Golden ratio is another one of those questions that pop up on our exam. And so I just like to kind of like give you a little idea of what that is. Essentially, it means that this exists almost everywhere in life. It's used frequently for art organization, but it's a way of measuring proportions of things. When we use the golden ratio on like the body proportions, for example, like measuring like, how big is, or how much room is between, like the nose and the eye and the nose and the top of the lip and, things like that. That's examples of proportion, one, but it can be measured using the golden ratio. So watch that video if you will, please. Here's an example of golden ratio used in a painting. And I've just got this one here just for fun. Alrighty, our next is, and I'm sorry, I cannot, like something with my like just mouth or something, I cannot pronounce this word. I'm just going to say hierarchy scale. Instead of saying hierarchical scale. It's a technique that uses unnatural proportion or scale to depict the relative importance of the figures in the artwork. So, for example, right here, we've got this like ancient Egyptian piece where it is this pharaoh and his wife. So traditionally, the pharaoh is seen as this like more powerful figure, whereas the wife is considered to be a lesser person, essentially, than the pharaoh is. And that's being shown throughout this artwork through scale. The pharaoh is larger, and so he is indicated as being a figure of more importance than the wife is. So yeah, you'll see that pop up, especially like in ancient Egyptian artwork. They use hierarchy scale a lot. Here's some more examples of that just to show that initially, anyway, with this movie, we've got Sully being like the more important of the two characters here, and Mike is much smaller and always gets his face covered up with different stuff because he's so small and is of lesser importance. But that's another example of hierarchy scale used in Disney, not in ancient Egyptian art. All right. I've talked about balance a good bit so far, but balance as a principle is something a little bit different than balance in like balancing variety and unity. I'm going to pause real quick to grab my computer charger. 1 second. All right, we're back. So the achievement of total equilibrium in art, the achievement of total equilibrium in art, a desire for visual balance is achieved through symmetry or asymmetry. So symmetrical balance, it's when near or exact matching of the left and right sides of the three-dimensional form or two-dimensional composition exists. It creates a sense of harmony. It can also allude to a sense of like stability and power and just importance. And so architects often employ symmetry, especially in like our historical government buildings. We'll see that they're very symmetrical, like on either side, and churches as well, to indicate this sense of power, the sense of stability, of just a sense of wholeness to them. And that's what we want to allude to in our government buildings, because we want our government to seem like it is strong and powerful and knows what it's doing. So that's why we see symmetry a lot of the times in architecture. Symmetrical balance can exist in other artworks as well, but architecture, like I said, is probably the most common. It's easier to comprehend than asymmetry. It's less desirable also in sculpture and two-dimensional artwork than it is in architecture. Few works are perfectly symmetrical. I have a piece here by Damien Hirst. It's called Posterity, the Holy Place. I'm not a huge Damien Hirst fan, if we're being honest. He is like one of my least favorite artists ever. But he is a contemporary artist, and he kind of had this focus on creating symmetry from things that were found in nature that lend themselves to be less symmetrical than man-made things. This piece here is a collage, I guess, a sculptural collage of millions of butterflies, or probably not millions, but thousands of like actual real butterflies. They're dead, of course, but he's arranged them in such a way that he is controlling this chaos through the symmetry of the piece. He's a weird dude. He's just been on a weird power trip for like most of his life. But I do want to share this piece because there's not a whole lot more examples of perfect symmetry in contemporary artwork. And Damien Hirst's piece is probably the most notable. All right, asymmetrical balance, also valid. It's just harder to identify like when it's being used sometimes. It's when the left and right sides are not the same. Various elements are balanced around a felt or implied center of gravity. This piece here is an example of showing asymmetrical balance for a conceptual meaning or for like the content's sake. We've got this huge wave. This is called the Great Wave painting. We've got this huge wave on the left-hand side here that's about to just like destroy these little boats that are below it. And then on the right side, the waves there seem much calmer and more stable. But this one, taking up like most of the left side of the page, shows us that it is a abnormal wave. It is not like the other waves that are happening here. And if it were the same size as those, we would be like, great wave, where? This just looks like every other wave that's in the painting. So that's why we see it here, the asymmetry being used here, and it exists in many other places as well, usually for an intended purpose if it's like very intentionally not symmetrical. Okay, our last two are repetition and rhythm. Repetition is the regular recurrence of visual elements. It lends itself more to unity, continuity, flow, and emphasis rather than variety and subordination. Repetition is the all-over design created by the repetitive ordering of elements. It's a common design strategy used in textile art traditions, such as weavings, even knitting, crochet, embroidery, all of those. This is an Afghan made here, a weaving. I get a little knotted pile, I guess, a type of weaving, where we've got elements such as shape and color repeating themselves over and over again to give this a sense of stability and regular occurrence. But again, this is a common design strategy used in textile art. We also see repetition used in other types of art as well, usually for a meaning or to give a sense of like wholeness or unification, or however you want to say. This is Andy Warhol's soup cans piece. And this is an example, I'll speak on this more in a moment, but of alternating rhythm or alternating repetition. So we've got this Campbell soup can print over and over and over again. And it seems really like there's no change that's occurring until you look at the label, the text that's there. Each time it changes from something different than the ones around them. And then when they're all put together like this, when the repetition, of all however many, the 30 soup cans there are put together, that this is like a collection of the different soups. But if it was just like one singular can, you wouldn't get that like sense of wholeness or like that sense of like this is a collection of something, not or this is a part of something larger, not just like an individual thing. Rhythm. Rhythm is created when one or more elements of design are used to create a feeling of organized movement. Rhythm creates a mood like live music or dancing. To keep rhythm exciting and active, variety is essential. So the way that I explain rhythm and repetition together is by thinking about a jazz performance, for example. Imagine you're like at a jazz concert and there's, the clarinet and the saxophone and the piano and the trumpet, whatever it might be, the singer. So when it first starts, when like the jazz performance first starts, everything probably sounds like on beat. Like there's a repetition, if you will, to the song. And that establishes like a sense of togetherness, of wholeness, completeness, unity, however you want to describe it, with the repetition. And then once the repetition has been established, we can have things like a saxophone solo that breaks out, that does not follow the repetition, and we can recognize that rhythm easily that way. But if there is too much rhythm, like there's like, the saxophone, the clarinet, the singer, and the piano are all doing different things at the same time, it's just going to be really chaotic and unorganized. So with rhythm, the simplest way to create it or to identify it is through repetition. So it can be organized using regular rhythm like Mondrian, where we have like, things that repeat themselves, like the color, for example, like the reds and the blues and the yellows and the whites. And then we have the same things that, like shape, for example, the rectangular shape that repeats itself over and over again. But the changes that occur are, where the color is placed. They're never beside of one another. We see like there's multiple sizes of the rectangles and the squares being used. And that's examples of rhythm, where there's like elements that are being used, but in different ways. But, it's organized because we have things like the repetition, like the color and the shapes, blended with, the variety of like the size of the shape and where the color is being used. So those two balance really well. Flowing rhythm, like Starry Night that we see right here, is a little bit harder to identify, but we see things like texture and line and color repeating themselves over and over again, but there's not really a pattern for it. We just know it's going to come back around at some point. So, the color is the same, the lines are the same. Oh, let me go back. Sorry, what happened there? The lines are the same, and the texture is the same, but it's sort of, it just moves around the piece in the way that feels natural to it. Random rhythm, where there is no repetition, is like Rothko's piece up here at the top, where there's nothing that comes back to it. It's just all sort of doing its own thing. There's no real like, connection back to the repetition. And then lastly, alternating rhythm is like the Andy Warhol soup cans piece, where we have something that's alternating, which is the text. Every time that we see a Campbell soup can, there's one thing that changes, which is the text. Whereas everything else stays the same. The repetition remains, where it's like the same Campbell soup can every single time, same size, same framing, same in the grid-like system, but that one alternating thing changes, and that's the text. So Andy Warhol's soup cans is the example there of alternating rhythm. All right, that is it for our principles. So we've got, just to recap, we've got our variety and we've got our unity, and to make a good, balanced principle, we meet in the middle with those. We've got repetition and rhythm, same thing, meet in the middle with those, and you have a successfully like balanced piece. And then you've got emphasis and subordination, and meeting in the middle with those makes a successful piece as well. We also have balance and proportion and scale as well that we talked about today. So this is just to kind of conclude with this being the end of module 2, or sorry, not module 2, the end of module 3. This is sort of like after this point in the class, we're sort of shifting gears a little bit. We're going to start talking about art mediums and art history and applying what we've learned from our art history or art theory unit, which is what I'm considering to be the elements and the principles, and also how to evaluate an artwork. We're sort of leaving that behind, but it will come back in, like, for sure, will come back in later on in the semester. So it's good to kind of like recognize this as being a building block to our next thing, and then our thing after that, and the thing after that. And this is also the point in the class where you can start writing your art analysis paper, start looking at that more seriously. We did our outline last week for this during module 2, but now you've got a sense of what rhythm is, what repetition is, and you should, and all the other principles. And so you should be able to now start applying the form, which is our elements and principles, and connecting that back to the content, which is our takeaway from this module, is how do we connect form and content together. But if you have any further questions about this, please let me know. I am proud of you guys for making it this far. We will see each other again in module 4 where we start going over our mediums unit, and I'm excited to see what that brings us. So this is the end of module 3, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and enjoy the videos.